up the food chain to the Kit Kats and expand from the very focused to the quite broad. And with that, I'll introduce Ashwin also from University of Arizona, and take it away.
Thank you, Rita. You said up the food chain, but I did my PhD out of poop, so.
Scat.
Yeah,
Scat.
I heard the title Scatman for a long time. Anyway, this is about a decade ago, I think. By the way, I'm an Indian from India. Probably talk to you in my Indian accent, right? But you will not understand anything. I got Melanie, my advisor at University of Arizona. She runs the conservation genetics lab. So I got here, and the first thing she hands me is a box of 70 mountain lion scats. So here's your master. Go for it. But anyway, that led to a lot of discoveries, should I say. But it was a very enriching 10 years that I spent studying mountain lions in the state. And one of the coolest regions, I should say, is this the southern Arizona sort of transition to Mexico, the Skylands region, essentially. So you'll see why, but I'll tell you about it in a bit. Mountain lions are the widest ranging mammal in the world, ranging from North America, all the way from British Columbia down to Argentina. And what's also cool about them is that they are wide-ranging in terms of their home ranges as well. So they travel great distances. And here's an example from Game and Fish data, GPS-colored mountain lions in the state of Arizona. You can kind of see their range of movements and how far they're moving. And here, yeah. But you'll see these southwestern mountain lion home ranges, I think they were about 450 square kilometers. I mean, absolutely, probably one of the largest documented mountain home ranges. Kyle, where are you, Kyle? Kyle Thompson? He's not here. Probably not. Stepped up. But yeah, he was also involved with this, helping out with this project. With GPS coloring mountain lions. But you'll see they're capable of crossing large natural, you would call natural barriers in many cases, like rivers, canyons. And the neat thing is that they're able to cross these kind of landscapes. But when you look at these collared mountain lions, you'll see none of them actually crossed an interstate. So, what's going on? Oh, there's Kyle. Hey. Anyone wants to learn, mountain lion, he's a mountain lion guy right here, so if you have any questions about what they do after capturing a mountain lion, you can answer that. But drawing your attention toward that point about mountain lions able to cross these amazing landscapes, but when it comes to interstates, there's something going on. And here's Interstate 8 in the southwestern part of Arizona, and here's, Interstate 8 and Interstate 10 right here, right? And there's not one crossing. However, there is one right up here if you look to the west of Flagstaff on Interstate 40. And there's another line that went really close to the interstate. These are data from Texas. Again, Interstate 10 going east. There's a female mountain lion that walks up straight to an interstate and then goes back into her home range. That mountain lion right there is this. And so that's my mentor, Ron Thompson. He was tracking this mountain lion, by the way, and that's the interstate. This is Interstate 10, and that's right here. So you're talking about, an amazingly capable species, and a wide-ranging species. Something's happening when it comes to roads, interstate. Game and Fish and ADOT documented, 41 reported roadkills during 2012. And we kind of mapped those data, but this is not a map of those. I'll show you those roadkills if you're interested. But what we were interested is if something's going on related to roads and mountain lines and interstates impacting these mountain lines in some way, we can probably try to understand that through genetics and how mountain lines are, if there is fragmentation or if the roads are having a significant impact, we can kind of see the population of mountain lion structure in some way. And so you can do that using genetics. So what we did is we collected samples of mountain lions from all over southwestern US and even in Mexico out here. And I think we ended up with a total of 700 samples, but after we checked for quality control and whatnot, we ended up about 530 samples. And what we did was to test this hypothesis of whether or not interstates are impacting mountain lion populations. We divided our sample set into hypothetical subpopulations, divided based on interstate highways only. And so, again, I wanted to take you back to that old story of getting a PhD out of poop. This is essentially the whole process. You bring and by the way, that's a gold mine right there. It can tell you what the mountain line is. Who's daddy, who's related to whom, and lots of information. That's what I call SCAT, the gold mine of ecology. So anyway, there's another mentor of mine, John Clemens. He's extracting DNA from SCAT, and you spend hours in the lab trying to obviously make your discovery, and it happens after 7 or 8 years. Anyway, so we analyzed a whole bunch of samples. Again, I don't want to get into the weeds of genetics here, but what we did was essentially we obtained the unique genotype for each individual mountain lion from scats, from tissues, from hunter-harvested samples, and we sequenced parts of their genome that essentially tells us how related or distant they are, or how they're essentially structured. So what we did was population structure analysis, and we found evidence statistically for 4 populations of mountain lions. And when I want to draw your attention to the colors here. I know. Okay, fine. I probably went colorblind looking at this plot, but basically, if you actually look, there is a purple, a green, a yellow, and a red. So those are the 4 statistically supported mountain lion populations. And so this plot doesn't make so much sense as this one. Essentially, what we did is we took that plot of genotypic assignment to populations, or 4 populations, 4 colors mapped on our sampling. So now you can see how these colors transition or structure themselves across the landscape, right? And you can see, here's where we are, and here's this purple sort of genotype flowing into the green, and then there's the structuring over here between the green and the yellow, and then the reds clustering together out here. So this kind of gave some sort of clue to us, okay, there is mountain lion population structure, but what is causing the structure, right? So we had to look at exactly where these differences are occurring. And from what we saw, we did see a significant transition around here, around this interstate, around Interstate 17, around Interstate 40, but we weren't specifically sure it was the interstates or not, or if it was some other landscape feature. So what we did is we took this data set one step further. 10 minutes remain?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we analyzed these data from using different analyses, and we used a software called GeneLand. And essentially what the software does is it assigns a geographic landscape based on genetic data. And so we're looking at subpopulations now and not populations. But what it did is essentially this software has no knowledge of the landscape. But these black dots here are the mountain lions that we sampled, right? So what the software did is created a genetic landscape around these black dots based on how their genotypes were divided across the landscape. Now, does this look like something to you? And so what we did is we took this output and we used GIS to overlay the interstates on this output. And a lot of these areas actually matched up with where these highways were present. And we even took it one step further and put all these state highways on there, and the canals. Well, the CAP canal is one canal that's got a 10-foot high chain link fence on both sides. And it is known to cause barrier effects. So that's another thing. Maybe the differentiation is quite high here because of the combined effects of the CAP running, in addition to the Interstate 10 and high traffic density between LA and Phoenix. Not as high traffic density between Tucson and Tucson and east towards Lordsburg. So we kind of wanted to also, there was some sort of evidence that yes, interstates may be playing a role, but we wanted to also take the ecological habitat side of things and see if we can find evidence of connectivity based on mountain lion habitat. So we tried to create a GIS-based model of mountain lion habitat, what mountain lion habitat looks like. Well, it kind of essentially told us where do mountain lions live on the mountains, right? So you can see the highly suited habitat is essentially the mountain lion. Right.
You didn't miss the forest for the trees.
So, there were a few neat things though that we could see. One of the things we took note of was if you actually look at I-10 East, there are, I think, Davidson Canyon. There's quite an underpass there, right? And if you look at I-10 West, not as much, but also there's the argument that this is the desert and the density of mountain lions is very low out here. So anyway, we went into a lot of discussion about this, but at the basic level, we thought, these were the general conclusions that we drew. Habitat may be playing a role. Anthropogenic structures are probably playing a role. And, you add things like the CAP canal to this whole equation, and that, is probably magnifying the impact of fragmentation. But why this matters is the fact that we are expanding. We are, there's urbanization, there's expansion of highways, there's Interstate 11, now there's the border wall and whatnot. So this is data from Maricopa Association of Governments, projected human population growth and expansion. And I want you to obviously focus on this area and take a look at what's happening there as well. And whatever you're doing with research on wildlife connectivity and corridors in the future, definitely include this, because this is kind of interesting. With scenario planning, a lot of this is obviously involved. But what I want to say is that mountain lions are smart, and they are really smart, and so they're using culverts to cross these days. I don't know, this is again cool data from wildlife cameras. You can set up wildlife cameras to kind of map out areas where they're crossing and where they are at. And also, try the biggest thing I want to communicate is if mountain lions are being impacted by structures like these, what about the other species that are on the landscape? Species that are not as capable of traveling such large distances. So that's something we've got to think about, and connectivity and conservation is something important. So we didn't just end with our genetic study of mountain lion, mapping mountain lion genetics. It's going to continue in that we've created a database for genetic monitoring of mountain lions. We've used advanced technology like SNP genotyping, or based on genome sequencing, and essentially created a Puma genetic database. So you can Google Puma genetic database and you'll see all these mountain lion dots, and you can click on them and you can look at their genotypes and whatnot. So it's online, and browse through these data. Published papers are linked to it, so you can download them if you're interested to read more. And with that, thank you so much, and I'll open it on for questions.
I'm not sure I know enough about how to phrase it, but how quickly do you think you can see a genetic difference develop in the population?
That's a great question. Evolutionarily, so we were looking at nuclear DNA or microsatellite DNA, and so this is more of a contemporary snapshot of population structure. How quickly, now if it were to be, if the differentiation was caused by interstate highways, what's the history of interstate highways? 50 years? 50 years, yeah, so that's what we're thinking, is that our assumption that they were connected prior to any of these anthropogenic impacts, we're seeing differences within 50 years. If this sort of expansion continues and we try to reassess using similar techniques or whatever, that's the reason why we have this database right now. Current snapshot, what will it look like in 10 years from now? And so if the structure becomes even more clear, then we know, it's happening very quickly. So, and it does.
Put in another interstate and split.
Right, yeah, and that now we have the baseline data to compare against, and so that would be very cool to.
Okay, that's an excellent endorsement of putting in another interstate.
All right, one more question?
I'm just curious if there's any research that's been done, similar research in Mexico on the mountain lion population down there to see whether, there's crossover now, kind of the baseline that you're describing before, say, a border wall goes in.
That's the plan. I don't know of any Mexican data sets which talk about genetic connectivity among species like mountain lion. I mean, Melanie is doing work on jaguar connectivity. I think they're also doing something on ocelots and other cats, because this is the only area we have 4 cat species, right? How cool is that? So I think it's imperative that we look into those kinds of. And Melanie is actually doing a pre-wall, post-wall right now. While the wall's going to go in and find, at least we can come up with some conclusive evidence of, is there an impact? So yes, it's being done, but the sampling I think is not as intense, because here Game and Fish collects hunter-harvested mountain lions, and there's like a huge sampling density on the north side. I don't know what the sampling density is on the south side of the border. So, but it would be good to, if anyone's interested, they can. Melanie is definitely collecting all these data. So, I guess one last question.
I was just wondering, you can test your hypothesis easily with a museum specimen, pre-interstate.
Yes.
And then to see if that genetic difference.
I have some museum specimens in my dissertation, and I have a similar map to this, based on museum specimens in my dissertation. I just didn't include it here. But we didn't have enough of a sample space. I think it was a very low, like 30 or 25 individuals. And it wasn't conclusive. For structure, you need like hundreds of samples to actually make a solid conclusion. So hopefully if we can get more museum samples, I think that would resolve some of that. But thanks so much.
All right, thanks.